welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie. I am the senior editor here, and I'm thrilled today to bring you a discussion about the ethical considerations brands must make before deploying AI in the contact center. And for that conversation, I am joined by Steve NIS, Vice President of Product Management at Enhouse Interactive. Steve, thanks very much for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks, Charlie. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely, and I think let's get right on into it. And I think the best place to start is maybe with a little bit of scene setting. So I don't know, Steve, if you could take us through sort of how AI use has changed within the contact center over the past couple of years.
Well, I mean, the big thing is generative AI. That's the thing that's changed everything. Everyone's started talking about AI again. I mean, we've been talking about AI being in contact centers for feels like 20 years. It's probably not quite that long, but it feels like it. But the last 2 years is really about generative AI. And the problem is with generative AI, it's almost an amorphous thing. Some people don't really know what it means. And what we like to say is, well, what's it practically used for? It's still, you need to boil it back down to what is the AI and how is it going to help you in your business? And generative AI has changed things. We say personalization at scale, the ability to understand a conversation and be able to provide specific feedback to that customer rather than a generic response is key. And then you've also got all the automation pieces. So you've got all the bigger pieces of automation that's changed, and more things can be automated. So more things that the agents used to have to take time doing can be automated. And that leads to the operational efficiency, which is the key driver in contact centers. We're always looking for that silver bullet that's going to fix everything. AI is not that silver bullet, but it's certainly something that's going to help. And it's that way of looking at the way that the agent works and how they can get better at their jobs and be more aligned to what the business needs them to do, which is spending time with their customers, not doing all the other tasks that agents have to do in their daily lives. And that's the key piece. And I think it's we would say, I think AI has shifted from a niche part of a contact center to being a fundamental part of every contact center. And that's probably the biggest change of the last 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you consider the kind of the first use cases that came out, and it was kind of conversation summaries, and to what we're seeing now, as you're saying, that kind of huge workflow automation piece, an AI agent is a term that I'm sure a lot of our viewers have come across quite recently too. But over the course of that 2-year journey, let's bring this conversation back to the topic of ethics. What sort of ethical challenges have contact centers been confronted with?
Well, the things that AI has always been accused of, the bias and fairness, which are the big ones. I mean, they can exacerbate any bias that exists in their training data. They can be exacerbated and pushed through, and it's not always transparent about where AI is being used, and that leads to a lack of trust. And that lack of trust is a fundamental problem with the contact center, because you're trying to build trust, you're trying to build empathy with your customer. And if they're saying, well, is this an AI answer? Is this, are they actually treating me as a person? If they don't understand what's going on, that's going to create a problem. But also the biggest problem here is really customer consent. I agree to my data to be used in this way. That's a fundamental tenet of GDPR, but it goes beyond that, and that's the ethical part of it. How are we treating our customers' data, and what are we doing with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen some lawsuits actually quite recently in this space as well about certain contact center vendors that have got in trouble from their customers sort of seeing testimonials on their websites, finding out that their data is being used within those companies to train AI models from the contact center vendor.
Absolutely. You always used to say that they're talking about billions of customer interactions being used to train their models, and I was always of the opinion, well, where's that data coming from? And so, in my mind, it was always going to end up in a courtroom somewhere. We don't know what the outcome of those court cases are going to be is yet, but it was going to end up in a courtroom. Someone was going to say, this isn't how I expected my data to be used, and they were going to be challenged somewhere. And it's why Enhouse has never used customer data to train our model. We use a different approach, different technique, and that's at the foundation of the data privacy and ethical use of data and ethical use of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's put a pin in that because it's something I want to come back to a bit later. Kind of the approach Enhouse is taking to ensuring consensual use of customer data. But let's also talk a little bit about the significant data privacy and security challenges that AI is also kind of posing for contact centers currently. Could you maybe take me through some of those as well?
Well, the simple ones are over collection, so data over collection, collecting more data than you need, and then that reflects on the compliance. GDPR is the one we all talk about in Europe, but it's impacted all over the world because it was the tip of the spear that everyone else is now following. So we get more and more compliance and regulations coming in to say this is how you need to make sure your customers' data is both kept private, used only for what you said you were going to use it for, and also it's kept secure. And AI also presents a data security risk as well, because AI can find the holes in your security that you may not have thought of before. So constantly there's a constant battle, a constant tension between the people trying to secure the data and the people trying to access it illegally, and that creates a problem. And those are problems that we've got to address within the industry. And that all of that comes around with then what I would say data ownership. Who owns your data? Whether you do, the company you're talking to does, or is it their vendor? And that comes back to those lawsuits that you've mentioned earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Went in a nice full circle there, and there is a lot. But just from kind of your previous answers, going through them, there's a lot for a contact center to consider. So let's also talk a little bit about how Enhouse is approaching ethical AI and helping its clients kind of push past some of those challenges that you've mentioned. I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit more too.
Absolutely. As I said a few moments ago, the Enhouse has never used customer data to train our AI models, and we never will. That's a foundational aspect of all the AI stuff that we're doing. And that means we have to do different things. We have to approach it differently. But it also means that we can look at some of the problems that we've been talking about in a different way. For example, bias and transparency, because we know exactly how we've taught our AI models to work, rather than we've given them a set of data and told it to just learn what it can. Different approach, and it is more complicated in times for us, but we believe the outcome is better and it's more ethical and it produces a better result for our customers. And so you have to be transparent about what you're doing and be transparent with everybody, not just your customers, but also your agents as well and the rest of your staff. What's going on behind the scenes? If they understand what's happening and they know how the data is being used, then they can be more open and honest, and that builds trust with the end customer. So you have to be able to explain what's going on. You have to be able to ensure that your data is secure, and it's privacy by design. So it's the only sharing the things that you need to share to achieve the end goal and nothing more. And secure by design as well, making sure you start with the foundation of making sure that the data is secure. And once you start exposing that practice to your customers, they start to grow in their trust with you, and that becomes a two-way relationship.
Absolutely, yeah, that's fascinating to hear. And just as a final question, obviously, there's lots of different contact center vendors that are out there, all with different approaches to ethical AI. How would you recommend that a contact center buyer perhaps evaluates their potential partners based on their sort of ethical AI practices?
Start with asking the question. can the vendor explain how they treat your data as a business? You're trusting this vendor with your data. Get them to explain how they use your data, what happens to it, and how it's secured. And if they can explain that, that's transparent. They're transparent about both how they're doing and what they're doing, and all of their security practices around that. That's the fundamental part of it. So ask, and then you ask around the compliancy pieces. How, not are you compliant? How are you compliant? And asking that how question gives you that extra bit of information that drives the fundamentals to explain what's going on and what's happening to your data. And as you build that trust, you build a longevity of a relationship with with your vendor, and just as you would want to do with your customer.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that, asking not just why, but how are you compliant. I think that's a really great lesson for all the viewers watching, and maybe the best place to end today's chat. But it was a really fascinating conversation, Steve. So thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And also thanks to everybody for watching. Bye for now.